I'm going to start off this afternoon. Are there requests for bill introductions? I'll call on Representative Hoy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have 22 RS 2806, expanding eligibility for Senior Care Act services to include Kansas residents younger than 60 years of age with younger onset Alzheimer's disease.
Are there any questions regarding this? Is there any objection to requesting introduction? Okay, seeing none, the bill will be requested. Any other requests for bill introductions? Okay, and then I just want to comment on the resolutions that we heard from the Senior Care Task Force. So it's not my intention to take those up as committee resolutions. We haven't done that in the past. They've always brought their resolutions to us. So I wanted to let you know that we would not be doing that as a committee, but if you are interested in sponsoring any of those individually, you're more than welcome to do that. You can refer back to them in the minutes from Thursday's meeting. And I think, were there 7 of them? Is that right? Okay, sounds good. We'll go with that. Any questions regarding that? Okay. Did I say that was from the silver-haired legislature? Okay. All of a sudden, I kind of thought maybe I said Senior Care Task Force. Okay. Silver-haired legislature. Okay. So we have today scheduled a hearing on House Bill 2490, and we'll open that hearing with an overview of the bill by Jesse.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Committee on Children and Seniors. Today is the first bill brief of the session for this committee, and we will be hearing proponents and opponents on House Bill 2490. House Bill 2490 proposes some modifications to the ABLE Savings Account Program, specifically to align with some changes that have been made in federal law. So this program is administered by the State Treasurer's Office, and generally what the program does is it allows individuals with disabilities to establish savings accounts to support their individuals' needs. And in doing so, they get to take advantage of some certain state and federal tax benefits. So if looking at the bill in Section 1, it amends KSA 75-651, which is generally the purpose statement of this act. And so what it does is it adds one of the intents to the savings program that the point is to gain some federal and state income tax benefits. Section 2, it amends KSA 75-652, specifically the definitions. So here you can see that a definition of an account owner changes from being a conservative or a guardian who may be appointed as an account owner for a designated beneficiary when that beneficiary is a minor or lacks capacity, to now a conservator, guardian, or person authorized by the treasurer through procedures established by the treasurer, and that person would also, act on behalf of the designated beneficiary. Another definition amended by this bill would be designated beneficiary. What it does is it adds a person authorized by the treasurer pursuant to KSA 75-653. And what that statute does, it allows the treasurer to authorize that residents of other states be able to open accounts and participate in the program here in Kansas. The last definition that sees an amendment in this bill is eligible individual, which strictly adopts the definition of eligible individual as the Federal Internal Revenue Code defines it. The third section is 75-653. It adds state to the description of which tax benefits can be taken by the participants of the account program. And the last section, section 4, it amends KSA 75-655. This section changes references to the definitions as they are changed and proposed in section 2. This section also includes references to the Federal Internal Revenue Code and procedures that would be established by the Treasurer's Office for their compliance with the federal program to be a qualifying ABLE account. And these sections would be effective upon publication in the statute book if passed.
Okay, thank you, Jesse. Are there questions for Jesse regarding the bill? Okay. Thank you. Okay, we'll open the proponents section with our State Treasurer, Lynn Rogers. Welcome back.
Thank you for allowing me to be here, and I appreciate your consideration of House Bill 2490. I support this bill because it allows the ABLE savings account to stay in compliance with mandatory federal regulations. If these are not implemented by November 22 of 2022, many of our folks that are using this program could lose the qualifications. In 2015, the ABLE program was approved. It was based on the 529 Learning Quest type of accounts. It was passed here in the legislature on a 40-0 vote in the Senate and 116-4 in the House. Just a way of thinking about it is if you are currently receiving SSI or Medicaid and you're living with a disability, you can only have $2,000 in a savings account. This program allows people to save for additional items that they may need down the road and helps them prepare for their future. This program is very successful. We've had almost 500 new accounts open in the last year, and our assets under management have grown almost 40% this year. So we want to continue to see that happen. The original legislation was modeled after basic legislation, so it limited it to guardians and custodians. And this, from a decision that was made in the Trump administration and the IRS in November of 2022, they expanded that to not only include those, but also to add family members, grandparents, parents, siblings to open these accounts, which will make them much more affordable and realistic for many of our families that are living with a disability. This bill also allows us to change if the age limitation changes. Currently, right now, you have to have received the disability before the age of 26. There's current legislation in Congress to change that to age 46, which will make these programs much more beneficial for particularly veterans, and that bill is currently being sponsored by our own Senator Jerry Moran. If that bill passes Congress, then we could adopt that here. We would say we would implement that immediately here. So we're very positive towards this, and I would be willing to stand for questions whenever. Madam Chair, I would suggest maybe that you have our attorney speak first, and then if there's questions of the State Treasurer's Office, either one of us could handle that, if that's okay. So, okay. John Hedges is our state attorney for the State Treasurer's Office. John.
Thank you. Yes, I think that's probably the best idea. Hold all questions till we've heard from everyone. So we'll welcome John Hedges, the attorney. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Thank you. Members of the committee. We're very excited in the State Treasurer's Office about the ABLE program. As staff attorney for the office, I help manage that program. And since joining the office this summer, I've gotten tons of calls about the program. And the number one problem with this program, despite its tremendous success, is the enrollment limitations that the Treasurer mentioned. In 2015, when this legislation passed, the federal IRS, the Treasury Department, had not issued the final regulations for this program. And so Kansas, like a lot of other states, had very narrow enrollment guidelines because we didn't know what the federal enrollment standards were going to be. We kind of went with the narrowest procedures, which was limiting enrollment for folks who have incapacity, they can't manage their own affairs, to custodians or guardians. That's expensive and it's time consuming, which defeats the purpose of this ABLE program, which is supposed to be a very targeted but flexible product that people can use to save for their future. A lot of people, they just don't have the time, they don't have the money or the interest, frankly, in getting a conservator or guardian. So these final regulations under the federal program mandate that we and all other ABLE states allow a broader group of people to open these accounts for people. And that was the federal government's recognition that limiting it to conservators or guardians is just too cumbersome in a lot of situations. So under the new regulations, if a person doesn't have capacity to enter their own ABLE account, a conservator or guardian can do that if one is available, or it goes to their spouse, their parents, grandparents, or siblings, and then finally a representative payee for Social Security benefits as appointed by the Social Security Administration. So that, in addition to being a mandatory change, because this ties to the definition of a qualified ABLE program, that change is going to allow us to enroll a lot more people in Kansas ABLE accounts. It's going to be a major benefit because it makes enrollment easier. So that change is in section 4 of this bill. I'm just referring to the current federal rules. The other major change, as the treasurer mentioned, is forward-looking. We and just about everyone else in the ABLE industry expects the ABLE Age Adjustment Act to pass soon, raising the eligible age of disability onset to age 46. We don't exactly know when because there's a lot going on in Congress right now. And, we expect it to be this session. It might be next session, but eventually we expect this change to be made. Rather than coming back to you at that point and asking you to update the age qualification in section 2 of this bill, we've just punted to the federal rules. So when the federal rules are updated, our language will be updated accordingly. So the Kansas program has been tremendously successful, and as the Treasurer's Office, we're already implementing many of the other changes required by the federal rules. We have almost everything we need in the Kansas statute to do that. This bill just resolves the current conflict with regard to enrollments and anticipating the future age conflict to allow us to continue to support Kansans with disabilities as they raise their own financial support. So I'm happy to take questions now or after other testimony as needed.
I think we'll wait till the end on all of them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next up we have Laura Peterzani. I'm sorry if I botched that. Community Outreach Specialist with Our Care.
Thank you, Chair and Committee, for the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Laura Peterzani. I work for a nonprofit organization named Our Care. For over 40 years, we've provided professional support and advocacy services for individuals and families with a loved one with disability. We offer 3 core services that include professional trustee services, a life care plan, where we help support an individual beyond what Medicare or Medicaid covers, such as advocacy, monitoring, as well as acting as court-appointed guardian or conservator if a court deems it necessary. And we also are authorized by the Social Security Administration to act as an organizational representative payee, where we can help manage an individual's funds received from Social Security or other benefits program if that individual cannot manage or direct someone to manage their money. In our work through our programs, one of the biggest hurdles we have faced when it comes to Kansas ABLE is parents who come to us because they are struggling to assist their adult child with opening an ABLE account. And right now, that issue is strictly due to the narrow Kansas statutes that currently exist. Families that seek to promote the highest level of independence for their loved ones and avoid unnecessary guardianships and conservatorships have been left with limited options on how to assist their loved one in saving for their future needs. The House Bill 2490 would give these parents the opportunity to help their child establish an ABLE account under the expanded hierarchy outlined in the final IRS regulations. Again, as you may know, Unlike the general public, individuals with a disability who receive Medicaid services are limited to having no more than $2,000 in non-exempt resources. As a representative payee, we've seen many individuals who occasionally go over their $2,000 a month resource limit for Medicaid services, left without an option but to perhaps buy something they don't need right now instead of being able to save that money for a future necessity. Again, as a representative payee, according to the current Kansas statutes, we cannot assist them with opening an ABLE account. The expanded hierarchy would allow us to do that. And while we have definitely experienced the barriers that come with the Kansas ABLE program as it currently exists, we've also experienced what the ABLE program can do for individuals with disability. Beneficiaries enjoy enhanced financial independence. They feel empowered to seek competitive employment. One of our clients confided in us that once he was able to establish an ABLE account, he wanted to seek a higher paying job because he felt not only enabled to do that, but knew that he could save some of those resources for his future needs without jeopardizing the benefits that keep him healthy in his home. Individuals invest in their education by using their ABLE accounts to pay for things like tuition expenses, and they overall just achieve a higher quality of life past what's possible without an ABLE savings account. So I am here to urge you to support House Bill 2490 and help remove these unnecessary barriers to accessing the Kansas ABLE program and invest in the future of Kansans with disabilities. I'd be happy to stand for questions at any time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, Megan Shreve with Interhab.
Good afternoon, Chair and Committee. My name is Megan Shreve, and I'm Director of Education and Communications at Interhab. We're the State Association for Providers of Developmental and Intellectual Disabilities. I'm here today to just say thank you for the opportunity to support the Kansas ABLE program and amending language to make it able for more people to join. Amending the existing statute will enable additional Kansans to secure ABLE accounts by expanding the list of people who can establish an ABLE account for an individual with a disability, just as the others spoke about. These accounts are essential for those individuals so that just people with disabilities can save for their future. In speaking with Interhab members, one of the biggest hurdles that they experience is that gap between guardian and conservator and someone else to establish the account, like a representative payee or another family member, and opening up this hierarchy will allow them to do that. In addition, the ABLE Age Adjustment Act, as spoken to earlier at the federal level, will make a big difference too in changing that age from 26 at the onset of a disability to 46 years of age. So staying consistent with Kansas or with federal language will allow additional Kansas to join that as soon as that language would happen to pass Congress. And that's all I have for today. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and I'm happy to answer questions as needed.
Great, thank you. Okay, I'll draw your attention to 4 other proponents that are written only that you can access through the email sent to you from Fran today. We have no neutral and no opponents listed. I guess, wait, before I go on to that, we need questions. Are there questions for any of the conferees? That Representative Helmer.
Yes, thank you very much. I just want to clarify. The maximum is $2,000 in this account. Is that correct? At any time? It won't go over that?
No, these accounts would allow you to put up to $100,000 in the accounts without any penalty. Currently, if you're receiving SSI or state benefits, you can only have $2,000 in an account, otherwise you lose your eligibility. When these were designed, it was very difficult for individuals with disabilities to save for tuition, for even any other kind of life expense. And so that's why these were created, so that people could control their own future a little bit better and not just be dependent upon state services. You're able to contribute up to $16,000 a year in these accounts. Most of them aren't. Our average account is about $8,000, $9,000 for that resident. We have about 1,100 accounts, and so they're not huge accounts. But if a family member wanted to put money aside for a child, an adult child, or someone that's getting to that age, because that parent was getting older, this would allow them to do that and not lose their state eligibility. So that's really the purpose. Is it gives the individual with a handicap some control over their future without necessarily losing their benefits, which are very difficult to get back and do that type of thing. Also, you can get a state income tax deduction of $3,000 per person, $6,000 for a married couple for this, just like you can your 529 accounts. And all earnings are tax-free on a federal level if you use them for approved qualified expenses. And that could be everything from housing to medical to items that would help adaptive services for their handicapped or, a wide variety of issues. Did that help answer your question?
Yes, may I ask one more question? Thank you. Thank you. That leads me to, if it can go 10,000 or above up to 100,000, and you're removing the guardianship or the conservatorship, the reporting, the annual reporting, then how is, and this is concerning a disabled person, and the reason you're having that person take care of that account, how are we to know, or anyone to be protecting that person from losing possibly $100,000?
Well, I don't think they would lose them. Part of the benefit of this is the folks that still need a conservator or a guardian can still and will have that in place. The rules for the reporting would still stay in place for some of those. But some folks that live with caps don't necessarily need a guardian or conservator for the financial side. They're capable of handling that themselves with their parent or with someone that they so choose. So, we, and again, I don't think, and I guess maybe Megan or Laura might be able to answer that a little bit more, but if they're living in a group home, or if they're living somewhere, they're going to have people watching that and helping that as well. And it's really no different than you or I managing our own account in some cases. Are we capable of handling our own money sometimes? So I don't know if they wanted to add anything.
The only thing I would like to add is that it's important to understand that a disability is not just an intellectual or developmental disability. An individual with a physical disability who has complete capacity to make decisions for themselves could benefit from this ABLE account program by being able to, again, have someone help them open this account if necessary, help them manage it if necessary, but for the most part, they can stay in control of, again, their own finances and be able to save for their future. Again, what State Treasurer, said about we're not removing a guardianship from anyone. That's a court proceeding that would have nothing to do with the ABLE account changes as it is. But if an individual, needs a guardian or conservator and the court decides that still allows them to use the ABLE account program with the guardian or conservator attached to it, if that makes sense.
Yes, I'm quite aware of guardianships and conservatorships. I've worked with disabled people for years, but thank you very much for your explanation.
Representative Wagner.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Rogers, would you mind coming? I have one question. So just for point of clarification, so if a family member donates up to $3,000 a year to this account, it's like a charitable contribution? Is that how it's
It's similar to a 529. This is a 529A is how it works with the federal IRS tax code. So it was based on the 529 education savings accounts. Those also, you can receive a $3,000 state deduction from your taxes, similar to what you passed, I believe, last year with the housing accounts as well. It's $3,000. So that is something that has been standard and used. And one individual that we know has 3 grandchildren. He contributes two of their children with their 529. The other one, who has some special needs, he contributes that $3,000 to that child in her ABLE account. So they're able to do it. They can't do both, but they can take one single $3,000 or $6,000 per couple deduction.
And they can't do that annually. I mean, they can.
I'm sorry?
They can keep doing it every year.
Annually, yes. Yeah.
Thank you. I have a question for the other people, if you don't mind. I think Megan, if you would, I guess kind of my sort of philosophical question is, so if we're getting around this $2,000 in asset, rubric that, the federal government has, then is there really, I mean, people seem very excited that they can get around it and have $100,000. Is there any reason, why do we still have a $2,000 limit? I mean, does that not really make sense to you? I'm just as sort of a side question, but I am, to spin down your assets has been something I think people like with Medicare and all sorts of things do. And so as just a policy thing in general, people don't think it makes much sense anymore, or I don't know what.
I can't speak to the 2,000, but just in speaking with InterHab members and people looking to save for their future, whether it be a computer or an iPad, as COVID hit and people were stuck in their group homes together with no technology, being able to save even money, gifts you get for Christmas or things like that, being able to have a place to put that over the 2,000. I have a cousin who is a high school student with Down syndrome who has an ABLE account. He works 2 jobs. He works at a trampoline park and he also works at a bakery, and he now has a place to put that money rather than to save. He likes to go to hockey games and baseball games, so just small things like that. And this ABLE account, I mean, again, not speaking to the limit of 2,000, but the ABLE account is kind of that gap to do so in the other way.
But so in your sort of, I want to say social worker world, I mean, so do people say, why do we even have this 2,000 limit? I mean, it's just kind of a dumb thing from the 60s or whatever. I mean, has that been discussed? I mean,
I'm not sure, and I'm not sure maybe Wayne or John want to speak to that part. I'm honestly not sure.
The only thing that I know is on the federal level, they have not wanted to change that because of what it would do to the budget. And, it could increase the amount, I think that it would cost. I mean, they look at every legislative issue from that standpoint. That's how I understand it. And I do believe it goes back to either 70s or late 70s, I believe, and it has just never ever changed, with inflation or anything like that. And it's just something they haven't wanted to touch. And in 2015, when this was first passed, the concept was this was a way to let folks with disabilities have some control of their future without necessarily busting the budget, from what I understand. I was not here, so I can't answer that entirely. And again, the benefits on the taxes are the state side in terms of the deduction for income. You can't take it off of your federal. The only federal is the income interest savings, which I think, again, the way the legislature, the Congress looks at that is that's a future income, so they don't have to count that. So it comes down to budgeting processes.
Okay.
So on the when you're saving, and we're saying saving for future. I was here when we passed the ABLE Act, and the intention was that to allow them to save for college. Yeah. So are there limitations as to the age they need to be before they can start withdrawing?
No, they can start at any time. Typically, they don't start till they're later. And part of the problem when we had the conservators and guardians is parents were even having difficulties opening accounts for their kids when they were a minor. So this alleviates that problem as well. But I think in most cases, they do save. Again, the balances are not huge. I mean, 8,000 is the average. There are probably a few that are higher, but in many cases, you think about that 8,000, there's half of them, of course, under that. And so they use it as an in and out. As I mentioned earlier, the 16,000 is what somebody can contribute. That's the federal gift tax amount that can be given. The other thing that on these is if you are someone living with a handicap and you are employed, you can put part of that money into these accounts as well. So again, it's to encourage people to work so that, again, they're not dependent totally on state services and things of that nature. So if that helps.
Yeah, that does. So if someone has a disabled child, a minor, then were they having to hire a conservator or
Many of
guardian?
them have had to. John might be able to answer that a little bit more too, but some have had to hire an attorney to open these accounts and because we require that documentation according to the state law. So this will keep us from having to do that in those cases.
So what is to prevent someone from abusing the account? I mean, I know you answered that earlier, but if they can help them open it, can they also take money from it?
Well, and they probably can. They do have to report, I mean, anything that they withdraw, they have to sign that it is being used for the benefit of the recipient or the owner. And then those are subject to IRS, audits and things of that nature. So that would be where that's at. I think if we see something that's very questionable, we could alert somebody as well. I don't know if we would catch everything from that regard, but I think what it does is it keeps people from lying in some cases, having an account elsewhere separate and they're able to do it honestly and above board. John, what have you found with the attorney or with the families wanting to open this and anything different?
No, I would agree with the rest of the proponents testifying. The matter of accountability, if you read through 38, almost 48 pages of the federal regulations, they really dove into that balancing act. The recognition that you don't want to open this up to everyone who wants to sign up and just, steal a social security number and a name and then have these tax benefits. On the other hand, there is the concern that you need to have some flexibility because a guardianship or conservatorship is not appropriate in all situations. So there's quite a bit of text in the federal regulations explaining the IRS's decision, and that's why they came up with this fairly narrow set of people. Presumably they're trusted family members. It's not just anybody who can do this. Just like any financial product, there's always some theoretical concern of fraud. I think the biggest detriment to that in this case is the IRS reporting. All of, as the treasurer mentioned, all of the withdrawals are reported to the IRS. There's a paper trail for that. So frankly, I think the concern remains, just as with any financial product. And as the industry, we're always trying to find ways to monitor these accounts to the extent we can. At the end of the day, however, this is what the IRS has decided. The definition of a qualified ABLE program mandates this kind of reporting. So as to who can enroll, that decision has been made for us, frankly. We do get questions, and certainly family members call us with questions about helping people manage the account. So there are eyes on these accounts, and we would certainly follow up with any concerns if we saw them. So I hope that answered any other questions. Were there other questions that I can speak to?
I've got more.
Sure.
So tell me about the November 2022 deadline that we need to make. Do we need to make these changes in order to be aligned with the federal government?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
So we were operating under proposed regulations, not final. They didn't have the force of law. So we were guessing at what the federal government was doing, like all states. We were operating under those proposed regulations until November of 2020, when the final regulations were updated. So the current rule under the final regulations is what we've described about enrollments. And then we're looking forward to changes with able age adjustment. But for enrollments, the current rule is this entire group of people needs to be able to enroll. The federal government recognized under the regulations that states need time to update. So we're operating under a grace period essentially through November 2022 of this year. So as long as we have our program in compliance with the new regulations by that November date, then we're fine under the federal rules. But if it comes to after that date and we haven't made this change to allow more people, this specified group of people to enroll, then our program won't qualify as a qualified ABLE program, which puts the entire program at risk. There will be tax consequences for the people who have what is called an ABLE account, but it's not a qualifying account. Their federal benefits and other things will be impacted. So we really need to do this to protect the investments that this 1,100 plus group of Kansans has already made in the program.
Gotcha. That's the peanut. The whole thing. Oh, Fran's bringing treats tomorrow. Oh, do we have? Oh, Mike, did you have further comment? We have written testimony. I think he's got something to add.
Yeah. Just and from the comments too, I mean, just lots of great questions, and I appreciate it. And Mike Burgess, Director of Policy and Outreach at the Disability Rights Center of Kansas. A couple of things. I mean, as they said, this is modeled after the 529 program, so it's largely similar, but now we'll have federal regs around that. The other thing to keep in mind too is there already are checks and balances in place for certain trusted relationships. So a guardian or conservator, if they were to be the ones to try and take advantage of that individual, they would face enhanced penalties from a district attorney filing charges compared to someone else. So there are other benefits too that cover some of the situations. Third thing to keep in mind too is this is one of an important tool, but it's one of several tools that individuals with disabilities have to try and plan for their future. So a special needs trust is another. This tries to hit, the ABLE accounts try and hit the sweet spot. If somebody has a settlement or an inheritance or something more significant, a special needs trust probably makes more sense and would, again, be shielded from that $2,000 asset limit. For folks who want to save a little bit of money and have the means to save a little bit of money, which is, a lot of other individuals, this is a really important tool for those situations. So as the treasurer said, the average size of the accounts isn't huge. The average contributions are not going to be huge in any one year. But for folks who are able to work a little bit, begin to work, we're removing a disincentive and helping them be able to plan for the future. Because as we know, an individual with a disability faces a lot of additional costs that aren't out there that everyone else, and this is a way that they can help cover those costs that aren't covered by their health insurance or Medicaid or other things. And so, like I said, it's an important tool to be able to help them to be able to live independently and in the community. So thank you for the chance to kind of clarify a few things and lots of great questions.
I've got a question for you then while you're here. So when we're talking about the amount of money they can have, is that the same as what we talk about in CanCare discussions with Medicaid of what they can keep of their own, what do we call it, their PPI?
Protected, well, you may be thinking of the protected income
level.
And those are kind of separate. So that's a monthly income limit that the protected income level covers. The 2,000 is an annual asset. So there's the famous example that I came up with. There was an author who wrote a book and he happened to have a disability. And he got the check from the publisher, and he ended up having to rip up the check because it would have cost him to lose his benefits. And so these are the kind of things that are important tools to help individuals who do have some ability to gather some income or, to be able to do that. So, there are bigger federal issues that lie. And there's a lot of folks working to help break that cycle, to end the cycle of the poverty trap that disability often is for individuals. And so this is an important tool to have in that toolbox to help do that. So again, the 2,000, it is a federal limit. There are discussions around, I mean, there's a lot of folks who would love to change that. This was one thing that Congress passed, and we have the ability to use that, and it's an important tool. And so again, want to share our support for it and appreciate the great questions.
Thank you. Thanks for raising your hand back there. Did I see another question? Representative Helmer and Penn.
Almost forgot what I was going to say, but I hope I say this right. I read the entire conservatorship and guardian statute, and it says that funds will be covered if there's any problems for conservatorships and guardians, and I stand to be corrected if that's incorrect. So there wouldn't be, if there are, so they're not taking money out of their own pocket when they're doing any actions for those people that they're serving. And the other thing, I just want to throw this in. I've been looking up and studying this, and there are so many conservatorships and guardianships that are in federal court right now that are yet to be served and found, that I feel like we're finding something here that is going to be found in federal court, and we're opening up a can of worms. And that's just my opinion, but there are so many conservatorships that we're doing the same thing that's in open court, in federal court, and in other states right now. So thank you.
Representative Penn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You actually asked a couple of my questions already. Thank you for that. Representative Penn, neighborhood skeptic. Let's see. This will be a question for Attorney John Hedges. How you doing, sir? Thank you for being here today, and to all of you, Mr. Treasurer, for your testimony. Just really quickly, and I understand what the thrust of it is. I wanted you to clarify, just from my understanding. We have to update this statute to come into alignment with what the federal government may do, so that we don't lose out on that and people aren't injured. Is that correct?
Well,
or can we extend what we currently have?
Well, there's two aspects to this bill. The main thrust that most of us have been talking about is the change to enrollments. That's already happened at a federal level. The current federal regulations require us to allow this expanded group of people to enroll in an ABLE account. We're operating under a grace period until this November, but after that point, we will be out of compliance unless we make the change to enrollments. We are also looking in this bill at another change to eligibility for an ABLE account, which is the Age Adjustment Act. Currently, our Kansas Act says 26, age 26. That is the disability that qualifies you for this account has to have occurred under that age. That's currently in alignment with the current federal law, so no conflict there. But if Age Adjustment Act passes at the federal level, then we'll have to come back to you and ask for you to strike the age 26 requirement from our Kansas statute. So rather than coming back in a year, we've put a prospective change to that. So we're currently in compliance, and we will be until the federal law changes. But once age adjustment passes, which we expect will soon, then that change, which is Section 2, will kick in. And all that does in this bill is mirror the federal age requirements, whatever they are. So it will automatically update.
Okay, and thank you for that, Madam Chair. May I? Okay, in the interest of time, I'll try to be kind of short. I told one of my esteemed colleagues my general disposition is to figure out how can this go wrong. I've heard everyone's testimony today about how right it is. Again, as the resident skeptic, how can it go wrong? I've been in group homes. I've had family members that have been in some settings like that. And when they have a commissary, if you will, there are some individuals on site, not disparaging anyone here, who take advantage of that and leverage that over them in nefarious ways. have you heard of anything like that at the federal level? Have you seen anything like that at the state level? And how do you actually guard against that?
Well, I have not heard those stories, and I think that largely is due to the fact, as was mentioned previously, that this is one option out of many. If people have a lot of assets, really an ABLE account probably won't make sense for them because you can only transfer in currently $16,000 a year. So $16,000 is a significant chunk of change, but there's that limitation. So in the situation where a person has a lot of money to steal from, basically, hopefully they would choose a trust or another vehicle, or have a conservator who would also manage the ABLE account as well as their general financial picture. So again, this is one option designed for a very narrow purpose of funding disability-related expenses. So they can't spend it for anything. The categories that they can spend it for are fairly broad, but it has to be to basically alleviate the impacts of their disability. So that provides another check. The IRS can audit, and we expect that they will start auditing these accounts now that the final regulations are in place. I haven't heard of any audits until now, but now that the official rules are here, we expect that to be another check.
Very well, thank you, sir. Madam Chair, one final question, please. When it comes to ascertaining, suppose that a conservatorship was set up, or one of the organizations were put into the position that they could establish this account. Who is it that determines disability, be it mental, physical, or whatever the case is? Because I see there the potential for fraud if someone wants to establish an account in someone's name without their family knowing, because they can't find family.
That's right. So the disability, there is a very structured definition of a disability. Essentially, the qualifying disability has to be one that qualifies the person for Social Security benefits, Social Security disability, or supplemental security income. And practically all of the people who are using ABLE accounts also qualify for that. So the Social Security Administration has already made that determination. You don't have to be receiving Social Security benefits, so a person could just be qualified, but not receiving benefits, in which case you're required to retain the diagnosis from a doctor. You have to have a written diagnosis that you can produce to show that you would meet this, essentially a Social Security qualification. So the rules mandate that you have this paperwork and be able to produce it. And again, we expect that more audits will happen as people start to use this program in the final form.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Madam Chair, for your patience. And thank you all, ladies and gentlemen, for your testimony today.
Representative Esau.
Okay, I'm trying to put into writing what I'm hearing to make sure I understand. And one thing that I definitely have a question on has to do with the age. We're expecting the federal government to set a different age than what we currently have, and this change, we would just say that whatever the feds say is what our age is. Is that the change? Am I understanding it correctly?
That is correct. And we're relying on an exception to the general rules. Because this is a tax program at the federal level, our Kansas Constitution allows us to adopt tax rules into our program. And I think that intent is already clear in the statute. Our office is already instructed to keep our program in compliance with the federal rules. And we do as the rules change. It's just we can't in this case because of the express conflict in the enrollment program. So for the ABLE age adjustment piece, the age 46, if and when it happens, this proposed language would automatically adopt that.
Jesse, where is that in the bill? How is that worded?
Yes, Madam Chair, when it comes to the age part, you can find it in section 2. The amendment is in subsection E. So it takes out an individual who is entitled through such taxable year, and says the same as defined in section 529 cap A of the Federal Internal Revenue Code of 1986, as amended.
Which we've done things like that with, like, whatever the federal mileage reimbursement rate is. And so it's not unheard of for us to do that. Okay, other questions? Representative Moser.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a comment, and this is just me thinking that basically our committee's back is against the wall to do this. It's just my thought. Thank you.
Well, I guess to respond to that, it is.
And I will take some responsibility for that. This, as we mentioned, became a regulation in November of 2020. We did not really know about this until John came on board in June of 2021. It should have probably been brought to you, last January, but we did not have any clue to that regard until, later in the year. So that's why we are trying to, move this along as soon as we can, because we really don't want these 1,100, counts to lose their tax status. Again, worst case scenario, we would probably have to see if we could move those to another state who had their plan up to speed. And so Kansas would no longer have any control or input on those types of accounts. There are about 45 states and the District of Columbia that have ABLE accounts. We actually partner with a group of 19 or 18 other states to get the best value for our constituents. So we, again, apologize for that. So
It may have been sooner, but it would have been these same changes.
it would have been the same changes, exactly. Yeah, and really that's what it is. I mean, we wrote in 2015 we wrote the law the way we thought the regulations were going to be implemented, and then from that period of time until 2020, it took the IRS a period of years to get to those final regulations, which then, and I'm sure a lot of what happened is again hear what goes on in other states. They also experienced many of the same concerns we had, that guardian and conservatorship were very limiting to folks that wanted to open a small account. And one of the things that really came to light was in the COVID relief, where individuals got the $1,300 and $700 and whatnot. Many of the constituents got that money and had to spend it immediately because it threw them over the $2,000 amount. So, and I think as mentioned by Mike, you could move this here temporarily, and then if it's larger money, you can go. I mean, again, we market it so that you can put up to 100,000 in it, but again, I don't know if we have any accounts really that are even that high. So
you mentioned that the Trump administration had expanded this. So when these changes are from the final,
the final regulations that they determined in November of 2020, and then they gave a 2-year window for states to adopt it. Some states have already adopted it, some have not, and so that's why they gave the 2-year window.
And that final, whatever you called them, rules.
Regulations, yeah.
That included the expansion by the Trump administration.
Right. Yeah, this was done, the final regulations that we're basing this law on were from the Trump IRS department from November of 2020.
And there were no rules before that, or no regulations?
No, they were just living on the temporary ones from the model legislation, I believe.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, that's correct. May I?
Yes.
So as I mentioned, the states had proposed regulations, and a lot of those were adopted into the final regulations. This was one of the new changes. So no one knew this was coming, the enrollment change. No one knew this was coming until November 2020. It's taken all of the states a while to catch up. So we're not, I don't think we're further behind other states in adopting this, but we do need to get it done by November. And again, I think because they originally proposed more narrow rules, but there was a lot of pushback to expand that to anyone, but the IRS went through that balancing and determined this is the rule. So no one knew that this was going to be the rule until November 2020, and now we're catching up from that.
Okay, Representative Smith.
Chair. Thanks, Mr. Rogers. Just a thought. if, say I would die and I put $8,000 into a son's, and could he spend that $8,000 within 6 months? Or, I mean, is there a restriction on him, what he does with it, if he's mentally capable of controlling his own money?
And John might have to help me answer this as well. It's similar to on your 529 accounts. If I'm the owner for my grandchildren, I can change the owner from me to someone else. And I believe that's how we can do on the ABLE as well. Is that correct?
Well, it's a little bit different from 529 because a beneficiary under 529 college savings, like grandparents could establish one account, parents could establish one account, whereas ABLE, each person only gets one account. And so some of the rules are different. But if I hear your question is like an inheritance would go into an ABLE account, there's annual restrictions on contributions, and it's $16,000 per year plus additional if you're working. But there's no restriction on when you spend it. So you could put the inheritance into the account, the person receiving it, and then they could spend it when it was appropriate for them, rather than being in a spend down situation where they have to spend it all at once on a TV or a lot of fast food.
Yeah. I think the other thing to think about too is if it's a mental capacity issue, then they may need the conservatorship or guardianship. But maybe somebody that's blind or somebody with Down syndrome that's capable of handling some of their own issues. So that's one of the reasons why these ABLE accounts are very positive. The disability has to onset or start before the age of 26, but it can cover a wide range, a wide variety. But if it was a parent that, and they were managing it for the child, they would probably have someone else set up or ready to set up, or the courts could come in and do that as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Representative Neighbor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In answer to sometimes the dates or the immediacy of a bill that you asked about, I know in insurance, we have to change a date on insurance things every year. And people on that committee go, well, why do we have to do that? Well, it's federal law. And so I look at this just like the EO issue that we took last week to make the emergency declaration. We had to move quickly. We couldn't wait because there was a set deadline. And that's there's a set deadline on this. There's a set deadline on several things that we have coming before us. And those are things that while you feel you're being pushed into having to make a decision, a lot of those things are time set by other laws. And so we need to be aware of what's in there, if there's a sunset, and if we are on top of it in good fashion. So my kudos to the treasurer for getting this underway. And I think with anything that we do, there are constraints, there are things that happen that we wish would not happen, and that all people were honest and true. But we know that is not the way it is. But at the same time, should our disability community have to suffer for a couple of bad apples in the basket? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, further questions? Representative Ousley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Not so much a question as a comment. I think we've had more discussion today upon the revising of the ABLE Act than we had passing the initial act in 2015 in this committee. So kudos to the committee members for diving into it. Thank you to the treasurer for bringing it to our attention. It was then Congressman Kevin Yoder from Kansas 3rd Congressional that brought this to the committee originally in 2015. And there wasn't much conversation about it at all. It just seemed like a good idea. We ought to do it. And I'm going to stick to that route today. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, and don't show any, like I said before, no neutral. Are there any, I don't have any opponents. Are there anybody here that'd like to, is there anyone here who'd like to speak as an opponent? Okay, well, we'll close the hearing then. on House Bill 2490. And that's all we have on our agenda.